Whose fantasy football value has increased and whose has gone down since free agency's begun? We're going to go over 5 the biggest winners and losers in the NFL so far to date. So let's start with one of the big winners. And actually, we're going to go with a pair of players. That is receivers from your Washington football team, Chris. I think both Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, newly acquired, are going to benefit from having a veteran quarterback like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm sure you agree with that.
Definitely. It's exciting times to be a Washington football team fan, finally. I love the addition of Curtis Samuel. I think he's perfect alongside Terry McLaurin. He's exactly what that offense was missing. He's going to have a huge role in this offense, and you talked about it. Ryan Fitzpatrick, maybe he's not the greatest real-life quarterback, but he's a great quarterback for fantasy wide receivers. We've seen him turn Brandon Marshall into a stud back in the New York Jets days. He made Devontae Parker a top 5 wide receiver. Preston Williams was a thing. He's going to, make Terry McLaurin a stud, even though he already is. And he's going to be a big boost to Curtis Samuel, again, in this offense. So both of these guys looking great for fantasy heading into 2021.
Yeah, some people might say, well, how does Samuel really become a riser? Washington's offense necessarily not better than Carolina's, but he goes from being the number 3 or at least tied for the number 2 option on Carolina's team, as opposed to now pretty much the clear number 2 receiver for Washington. And look, with McLaurin, I don't think he's reached his ceiling yet, because think about what he's done so far. He did this with a combination of guys like Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Alex Smith, and Dwayne Haskins. Okay, if he can survive with that quartet of quarterbacks, I think he'll do a lot better with a guy like Fitzpatrick, who has no fear throwing it into tight windows. All right, now on the flip side, the biggest loser by far, I think we've got to see, at least in terms of fantasy value, is A.J. Dillon. Everybody was just hoping and praying that the breakout was coming, because he was going to be the guy once Aaron Jones left, and Aaron Jones stayed. All right, one of the first big deals we heard was Aaron Jones not leaving Green Bay. So I was never really big on Dillon to begin with. What about you? Do you think this really plummets his stock that much?
Oh, definitely. I don't even see how he can be drafted in a regular, 12-team fantasy football league, because nobody would draft Jamal Williams if A.J. Dillon wasn't there. So why are we going to draft A.J. Dillon just because Jamal Williams is gone, right? This is going to be, if anything, I think it helps Aaron Jones a little bit, because A.J. Dillon is not going to take as much passing game work from Aaron Jones as Jamal Williams did. So to me, A.J. Dillon is nothing more than a handcuff at this point. And, you shouldn't really be drafting pure handcuffs early. You shouldn't be drafting pure handcuffs at all in most of your fantasy leagues. So to me, A.J. Dillon is a guy that's just going to have to sit on your waivers, and, either Aaron Jones is going to get an injury, or he's just going to sit on your waivers all year, I guess.
Yeah, and there are some cases where you do get that handcuff. Everybody was holding on to Alexander Mattison last year, thinking that Dalvin Cook might break down, and it never happened. So that was basically a wasted roster spot. Everyone's going to get excited about that one huge game Dillon had last year, but let's face it, unless Aaron Jones does go down with injury, Dillon is, like you said, he doesn't even need to be drafted in 12-team leagues. I think he will be in a lot of leagues because people still want him to be a thing, but I don't think he's going to be a thing. It looks like James Robinson is still a thing. People expecting somebody like Kenyon Drake, James Conner to come on in and share the ball with him, and that just didn't happen. We've seen all these other running backs either stay with their teams or sign elsewhere. So clear winner, James Robinson, because the only guy they brought in is Carlos Hyde. Do you think the Carlos Hyde-Urban Meyer reunion is any threat to James Robinson?
I mean, it's a little threat, because he's going to go from a guy that gets pretty much every touch to a guy who might get like 70% of the touches. So it's a little threat, but still, this was great for James Robinson, because, Carlos Hyde, he's not the guy he was early in his career. Obviously, he's nothing more than a backup. I don't think anybody expected James Robinson to get 90% of the touches heading into 2021 anyways. So for them to only go out and sign Carlos Hyde was a huge win for James Robinson, and he's looking like a solid value, in the late second, early third round of drafts right now.
Yeah, definitely a solid value. I don't think that he's going to put up numbers he did last year. I never expected that. But still, this is a guy I honestly thought his stock would fall quite a bit, making him more of a mid to lower tier RB2, and he's still more kind of like a low-end RB1 still, because there are not a lot of running backs I think will get as many touches as him, even as of right now. So yeah, you got to like Robinson's ADP. I think it's still pretty fair. All right, now you have to explain this to me. One of the most puzzling moves so far is a guy like JuJu Smith-Schuster who went nowhere. He's just stayed in Pittsburgh. He had all these offers. Thought he was going to go to a team like Baltimore, maybe the Jets, maybe my Dolphins, and he just stayed, taking a one-year deal. The same thing. He's not going to get more targets. This offense will pretty much be the same. So, what do you think is going on here? Why did he choose to stay? I mean, do you think that maybe this makes you worry that he has a fear of trying to be the number one guy somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to question a guy for making a decision that he thinks is best for him, but the reports were the Chiefs had offered him $11 million. I mean, you got offered more money to go play with Patrick Mahomes and you chose to stay in Pittsburgh. You definitely have to wonder, if football and winning is the most important thing in JuJu's life. And if it's not, I mean, that's fine. So definitely this is not good for JuJu Smith-Schuster's fantasy value. Now, he was okay last year. I think he was better than we think he was last year. But the problem is, like you said, this is going to be the same exact offense we saw last year, except maybe minus James Conner. But as far as the passing game goes, Deontay Johnson's going to get the bulk of the targets. Chase Claypool's going to be the big play, right? The kind of the gadget guy around the goal line. And JuJu's just going to be a short slot player who doesn't catch anything down the field and is going to be really very touchdown dependent. So good for JuJu, sticking in Pittsburgh if that's what he wanted, but this is not good for his fantasy value.
No, look, we won't question what's good for him. He's going to do what's best for himself, his family, not what's best for us fantasy managers. But still, it's just really disappointing because not just that it doesn't do anything for his value, but it could have been a boost for Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and even James Washington, more targets to go around. And now it's just kind of the same as last year. So, what could have been. All right, let's go to our next winner, and a guy, again, who's kind of benefiting because nobody's come in yet, to try to steal touches from him. That's Myles Gaskin of the Dolphins. Been rumors that maybe Chris Carson would come in. Well, he stayed in Seattle. Again, Aaron Jones, that didn't come true. So Myles Gaskin, do you think he's still fantasy relevant in 2021?
I definitely do. I mean, he's got to still get through the NFL draft. I think at this point, they signed Malcolm Brown for whatever it was, $2 or $3 million. I don't think they're going to go out and sign a guy like James Conner. And we saw Kenyon Drake's with the Raiders now. So that's pretty much it. So you got to think he got through free agency. Now it's about the draft. Will he get through the draft? Look, Myles Gaskin was really good last year. The Dolphins might be sitting there thinking, hey, we don't need running back help. We have these high draft picks. We could use them in other areas of need, other positions. We don't need running back help. So right now, Myles Gaskin is looking good going forward into 2021. Like I said, he's got to dodge the bullet of the NFL draft. But if he does that, he's the starter there. And, he's being drafted in the 6th, 7th round of drafts right now. So he's looking like a real value.
Yeah, and even if he isn't the only guy there, still going to get a fair amount of touches. And what I like is that he's really good at catching the ball out of the backfield. So he kind of brings a decent floor in PPR. You did mention Kenyon Drake didn't go back to Miami. But he did go to the Raiders, which was kind of a surprise. And so that's got to make Josh Jacobs a loser so far in free agency. One of the guys who was near the top of the rushing attempt leaderboard. I don't think that's going to be the case. Look, with the kind of money they paid Drake to come in, he's not just going to be sitting on the bench, coming in every once in a while. This could be a 1A, 1B situation too.
I think it will be. And I've been drafting Kenyon Drake a lot in my best ball leagues as my RB3, RB4. And I haven't been touching Josh Jacobs. And I don't care how big of a Josh Jacobs fan you are. You have to be real at this point and think to yourself, the Raiders don't believe in Josh Jacobs. They just don't. They might think he's okay, but they don't believe in him as a 20-touch guy. He's not going to catch 60 passes like everybody hopes for. He's right now, he's undraftable to me unless he falls, to the 5th round or later. Because like you said, I do think it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation. And for the money they paid Kenyon Drake, $11 million, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, if there's not weeks where Kenyon Drake is getting 60 to 70% of the touches and everybody's complaining about John Gruden and Josh Jacobs. So to me right now, I'd much rather just pass on Josh Jacobs and wait and draft Kenyon Drake later. But yeah, this looks terrible for Josh Jacobs' fantasy value heading into next season.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far to say undraftable, but based on where he's going and, someone else is definitely going to take him before I will. He's definitely not in the top 25 overall players. he can't be taken in the second round like he was prior to free agency. So definitely a big faller here. Now, a guy that I kind of mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I liked as a sneaky late round pick in best ball drafts and someone to look out for, and that's Gerald Everett. And he landed in a great spot, in my opinion. That's Seattle. So look, we're always looking for the next kind of breakout tight end or a guy that emerges and gives you that value later on. I think Everett could be the guy. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, we've seen Greg Olsen have some success in this offense. Will Dissly have some success in this offense? So, this offense was lacking badly in a tight end. 2 years ago when Tyler Higbee had that monster stretch at the end of the season, you got to remember Gerald Everett was the pass catching tight end there until he got hurt. So he's a very good pass catcher. I think this is great for his value. And he's a guy, in the best ball drafts I've been doing, he could be, your number 3 tight end at the end of the draft. I think he's an absolute steal in drafts. I think his value is only going to go up and up as we get closer, July, August, and we get into preseason and people see his usage in this offense. So absolutely huge winner going into 2021.
And that's the great thing so far. I mean, it's like he's still an afterthought. Nobody really paid attention to this deal because we haven't really thought much of Gerald Everett, in fantasy world because he hasn't really been startable. But now he's going to get the tight end 1 job to himself. A great quarterback in Russell Wilson. Yes, Russell Wilson will still be in Seattle next year, probably. And so, yeah, there's a guy you can wait for and still get. You don't necessarily want him as your starting tight end in any league, but a really high upside tight end too. Guy that I'm definitely not so high on anymore. Well, let's talk about 2 guys, tight ends that we really had high hopes for, thinking they would land in great spots. And of course, they both go to New England just to cancel each other out. So Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry both being on the same team. I mean, this has to be a double loss, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. When Jonnu Smith signed with New England, who was one of the first, free agent signings as far as skill positions go, I was really excited. I thought, okay, he's going to be a top 10 tight end, right? They don't have a lot of passing game weapons there. And then the very next morning, Hunter Henry signs. And yeah, this is bad for both of them. There's going to be weeks where it's Jonnu Smith. There's going to be weeks where it's Hunter Henry. And there's going to be weeks where they both kind of get a little bit. But you're never going to be able to predict those weeks, unless one guy's out. And if you're banking on that, that's not a good thing. So to me, neither of these guys are draftable in 2021 because, again, you're never going to be able to figure out when to play either one. So just leave them on the waiver wire. If one of them happens to get hurt, sure, the other guy will be a hot waiver wire pickup, but don't draft either of these guys.
Yeah, I'm going to have 0 shares of both of these guys. And look, honestly, even when it was just Jonnu Smith or even if it was just one of them signing with New England, I would still probably have no interest because, let's face it, the whole 2 tight end thing, yeah, that worked great back in the day for the Patriots. That was when Tom Brady was quarterback. Okay, we've seen that right now Cam Newton is still their guy, and if they draft somebody, they'll have a rookie. They're not going to bring in somebody amazing to upgrade the quarterback position. And with 2 tight ends on the field at the same time, there's no way either one of them stands out, at least on a regular basis. So I'll pass. Not going to pass on a guy that I think is going to be overlooked again. We maybe haven't noticed that Melvin Gordon is still one of the few, I guess you can call him bell cow backs, at least he's going to be this year because Phillip Lindsay is gone. And Gordon kind of had some sneaky second half value, came on late, was really efficient. But that Broncos team just kind of in general was a mess. I feel like with some of the pieces they have there, Courtland Sutton coming back, maybe a different quarterback this coming year, Gordon is going to be a really strong value.
Yeah, I've been on Gordon all off season, a guy you can get in the 5th, 6th round as your RB2 who is locked into 15 plus touches. And that was when Phillip Lindsay was still there. Now that Phillip Lindsay is gone, I think he's one of the biggest steals of the draft. If you start your draft with one of those stud running backs and then you just draft, 3 or 4 wide receivers, you can take Melvin Gordon as your RB2 and he's going to give you a nice, safe floor. He was efficient last year. It looked like it took him the first half of the season to kind of get up to speed with the new team, with the new offense, but he looked good down the stretch. And I think that's going to carry into 2021. And I think we're going to look back and say, how did we let Melvin Gordon, fall that far in drafts?
Yeah, and if you wait on your RB2, I think he's the perfect guy. All these mocks we've been doing, we've been seeing him last sometimes till the 5th round. That's a pretty good spot to get your second running back if you decide to get a tight end early or load up on a receiver first. And then our final loser, look, say what you will about all the quarterbacks he's played with, it doesn't matter. But Allen Robinson he's not going to be freed like we thought. He's still in Chicago, took the franchise tag, and his quarterback now is Andy Dalton. I just don't think we can even have him among the ranks of a top 10 receivers anymore.
No, I mean, you can't drop him too far because, like you said, we've seen him be successful with whatever quarterback he's had. But, we were all really hoping that the Bears would go out and upgrade that quarterback position, and instead, or he would become a free agent, right? But instead, he franchised, signed it, he's staying, and they brought in Andy Dalton. And according to Andy Dalton, they assured him, you are going to be the starter. That's why he signed. And we saw last year with Andy Dalton, look, Andy Dalton is a fine quarterback, but he was not great for fantasy. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, they both took massive hits in their fantasy value with Andy Dalton last year. So this isn't great for Allen Robinson, but just because of how good he is and how good he's been with other quarterbacks, you can't drop him too much. But I do agree, outside the top 10 now.
Yeah, and for Robinson, I guess maybe not a loser so much as a non-winner. We'll go with that, right? Could have been so much better, and it's not. He's still in Chicago. All right, guys, that does it. These are just our early winners and losers. Free agency is not over. A lot more moves to be made. We're going to see whose stock really rises and falls, and that's why we mock draft every single week. Catch us on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sign up for our email list, and you can join us live as well. Check out the link in the description and be part of the Endgame community. All right, thanks for watching.